Hey guys, it's me, Dawson. I hope you guys are having a great Sunday. I want to introduce you to my roommate, my best friend, my accountability partner. This is Bradley Jennings.
What's up, guys?
He and I have known each other for going on 4 years
Yep,
now. We're
4
about to
years
hit our
now.
4th year. We've lived together for 3 and he hasn't killed me yet, so that's a pretty good sign as to his character. He's a good guy. And I really just kind of I wanted him to be a new face in with an old face, something that kind of solidifies that there are people outside the church that have the same belief systems, or outside our church is what I mean,
Yeah.
that have the same belief systems that we do, and it's awesome to kind of hear new opinions that aren't just coming from North Hills, but coming from your church, which is
at Biltmore Baptist,
up in North Carolina, where
so.
things are weird because your governor's interesting.
Yep.
But we really wanted to, he and I kind of discussed it a little bit this morning, but we wanted to find something that was very specific to you guys now and what you're dealing with today. And that obviously is COVID, and what we thought about, what do you do about things being uncertain and crazy and weird in a difficult time. And my thought process went straight to Peter walking on the water. So if you guys have your Bibles in front of you, and if you don't, go get it real quick. Pause the video, go get it real quick, come back, click play, and then you can keep on going. But we're going to head over to Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 to 33. Those 11 verses we're really going to dive into for the next 10 or so minutes. And that should be it. Sound good?
Sounds good. Let's get to it.
I'll start. I'm just going to read it out first in case you guys don't really have a Bible, and then we'll kind of break it down. Sound good? Awesome. I love it when people don't answer me.
Same.
Yeah. All right, we'll start verse 22. This, by the way, just a little pretext. This is right after Jesus fed the 5,000 plus people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So that's a huge miracle to take such little food and feed over 5,000 people. This takes place right after that. So in verse 22 it says, immediately the disciples got into a boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. So the crowds he's dismissing is the crowds that he just fed. That's what it's talking about right there. Verse 23, and after he dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. Verse 24, but the boat at this time, the boat that the disciples are in, the boat at this time was a long ways away from land, beaten by waves and winds against them. So that means that there's a huge storm going on in the middle of the night, which is terrifying.
Scary.
Because it's dark and you can't see and you just know it's windy, the waves are crashing, and it's probably raining. Verse 25, and the 4th watch of the night, that just means it's been really late, probably 2, 3 in the morning. Somebody, for the 4th person's already woken up to keep watch for the night. Came to them, verse 25, and the 4th watch of the night, he came to them, he being Jesus, walking on the sea. So this is when Jesus is walking on water. Verse 26, but the disciples that saw him walking on the water were terrified and said, it's a ghost. And they cried out in fear. So where they're at right now is super dark, the wind's blowing, the waves are crashing, it's probably raining, and out of nowhere, one of the disciples yells, ghost. I don't know about you, I've been terrified. If I woke up from my nap in general, I'm already confused. But if you wake me up yelling there's a ghost and it's raining like crazy outside, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah, that freaked me out.
It'd be awful. Verse 27, but immediately Jesus spoke, saying, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. Verse 28, and Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. Verse 29, he said, come. So Peter, just one word by the way, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus, which is awesome. That's a miracle right there, in case you guys were curious of what the definition was. Verse 30, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, Lord, save me. Verse 31, Jesus immediately reached a hand and took hold of him, saying to him, O you with little faith, why did you doubt? And then finally, verse 32 and 33, it says, and when they got on the boat, the wind ceased. And verse 33, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. So that's kind of the story. And I know a lot of times you read those stories and you're like, yeah, but Dawson, have you ever walked on water? Bradley, have you ever walked on water?
I have not.
The answer is 0. And on return, have you guys ever walked on water? Actually, the answer is going to be no. The question you get or maybe think about is how does this relate to me? This is a cool story. Awesome. It shows how powerful God and Jesus were. It shows how awesome he was and how he stepped onto the boat and the storm ceased, how Peter was walking on the water in the midst of the storm. And it shows how awesome Jesus is. But then the thought process of how does this really kind of relate to me. And this is kind of where he and I are going to break that down for the next 5 or 6 minutes or so.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you see Peter get out of the boat, and one of the characteristics that we notice a lot in this passage is Peter, when he first gets out of the boat, his eyes are on Jesus, right? He's taking a step of faith towards Jesus. He's keeping his eyes on Jesus. But what does it say in verse, 28, 29?
31.
30
and 31.
30 and 31, right? It says that he focused on the winds and the waves, right? He focused on worldly things. He focused on things that were temporal, the storm, which he was in great fear of, but he took his eyes off Jesus. And what happened, Dawson? What happened when he did that?
He started to sink.
Yep.
That would have been scary too.
Obviously. Yeah. You're in the middle of the sea and you start sinking.
Right.
That would
no fun.
That would not be good, right? So obviously right there, that's one thing that it can apply to you as a student, right? And it can apply to us as well, right?
Absolutely.
When we take our eyes off what Jesus wants us to do or who Jesus is in general, right? We start to sink. We start to become overwhelmed with things of this world. And so that's just one characteristic right there out of the gate that you can say that applies directly to not only you and I, but everybody that's watching.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that's really important. Like, even in verse, I'll come back to that because it comes a little bit later. But he's talking about, Bradley was saying, you can replace the word see with whatever you need it to be. If it's fear, if it's anxiety, if it's depression, if it's I struggle with an addiction to pornography, if I steal, if I'm lying to my parents, replace the word see with whatever fight or sin you're struggling with, and use this as a metaphor. So imagine you step out onto a sea full of anxiety or fear or depression or whatever it is, and you have your eyes fixed on Jesus like Peter did to start with. And first of all, important to note, Jesus is walking above all of that. So he's above your fear, he's above your anxiety, he's above your addictions, your losses, the demons that you're fighting. He's above all of that. And while you keep your eyes fixed on him, you're immediately set above that because he's above that and he's holding you there. He's the one that keeps you there.
Yep.
But then, like you were saying, like as soon as you look around and you notice, like, oh my goodness, there's so much fear around me. What am I doing? What's going on? You start to sink into it immediately. And then, but this is what I want to bring out. At the end of verse 30, in the very start of verse 31, it says, when Peter's beginning to sink, he says, he began to sink, and he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him. So, like, instantly, right? So if you feel yourself sinking into that, all you have to do is say, "Lord, help me," and immediately God's going to help pull you out of that. I think that's important to note and kind of pick up there for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so, like we said, that's one way, right? That Jesus is above all. If you keep your eyes on him, first off, he will hold you above that and keep you from sinking in that. I've lost my place. You want to go?
Yeah. So I think the other piece at the end of verse 31 is kind of important to note as well. So after Jesus, I'll read the whole verse for you. Jesus immediately reached out his hand, took a hold of him, and saying, "O you with little faith, why did you doubt?" So I think it's really kind of important to note that even though Jesus reached in and saved Peter's life, there's a little bit of disappointment there, because all we have to do, Peter was on the water. He was standing on water, walking towards Jesus as long as he kept his eyes focused on him. And then when Jesus pulls him out, he's like, "Look, I had your back. Why did you look away from me? Why did you turn your eyes from me when I've got you?" So I think it's important to note, even though sometimes you kind of fall and God picks you up, it's okay to get that not necessarily discipline, but that repercussion of why did I take my eyes off of God? That's okay to feel.
Yeah.
Because that's what keeps you on the straight and narrow next time you reach that situation. Because you don't want to doubt God.
Yeah.
Right.
I think another thing that you can clearly see in this passage is the power that Jesus has, right? Not only is the man walking on water, but when he gets in the boat at the end of the chapter, what happens, right? The storm ceases completely. He has the power, and he didn't even say anything. The storm just stopped when he got in the boat. And so Jesus, and you'll see this throughout Matthew or any of the other Gospels, the power that Jesus has, the power that our God has over not only the seas, but over fear and anxiety and depression and your addictions to whatever it may be, right? Like Dawson was saying earlier, that God has that power to overcome any situation and to be above every single fear and doubt that you may have, not only in this time, but for the rest of your life.
Exactly. I think it's is huge. And he and I were kind of talking before we started this video. It kind of goes along with the last couple of verses, but you made a great point about how the boat is almost like the church. And let me remind you, the church is not the building that we go to, because if it was, COVID would have been a huge hit. But the church is us in us. It is God living in us. We are the church, His people. And you were saying that the boat was the church, the community, the us, right? So like when we come out and God saves us from our fear, we invite Him into the church to be with us, and immediately all the scared and the fear and the COVID-19s and the anxieties and the depression, it just ceases when He's a part of our lives.
Yeah, and one last thing about the boat, right, is when we're in community together, we also get to help each other, right? So when we're all in the boat together, not only do we have Jesus beside us that's, above us and helping us with everything, but you also have your brothers and sisters in Christ right there beside you with helping you overcome your anxiety, the people that you can physically talk to and reach out to. Like Dawson and I have a really great friendship built on that accountability, built on that community of trust and being able to talk to people. So if you're struggling with that kind of stuff, I want to urge you, and Dawson wants to urge you too, to reach out to not only maybe your youth pastor, but to a close friend or somebody that you could trust, that you could talk to about those kind of things, because at the end of the day, we all need somebody like that in our lives to hold us accountable.
Right. It's also important to note, like when Peter walks out onto the water, what else is happening with the other disciples? Are they doing their own thing, or are they watching what's happening?
They're watching.
Right, so they watch and they know what it looks like when Peter's on the water, but they also know what it looks like when he's sinking. So and we're going to go back to that metaphor, like if you find yourself sinking, your friends that have seen you follow Jesus know what it looks like when you're not following Jesus. And that's accountability, and that's not a bad thing. Nope. Sometimes it means hard discussions. He and I have had hard, difficult discussions, and we've had to talk about stuff and kind of argue through some things before. But like those discussions are super, super important, and they build that bond because like, hey, this person I love and respect with my heart, and I trust this person because he's going to give me the best advice. He or she is going to give me the best advice, even though it might hurt a little bit because they're calling me out. It's important to have that in your life.
Yeah.
And then finally in verse 33, you brought this up a little while ago because he was studying, he was in North Carolina this morning and studied on his own, and I studied on my own, and we kind of came together and talked about it. So I'm going to let you kind of take away verse 33. I'm just going to read it to you for those who might not have your smartphone in front of you because you're watching us. Verse 33 says, "Those who were on the boat worshipped Him, saying, 'Truly you are the Son of God.'" And I'll let you take it from here.
So what I found really interesting throughout my study when Dawson laid this on me this morning was verse 33. The disciples, when they said, "Truly you are the Son of God," it was the first time in Matthew that they recognized that God is, that's who Jesus really is. And it kind of parallels with Matthew chapter 8. If you're familiar with it, it's when the disciples are again on a boat and they're sailing on the sea, and there's this big storm, and Jesus is sleeping, and they're asking Jesus, like, why are you, how can you sleep in this time of fear and anxiety? And he goes, and he basically gives them the same answers, like, "Oh, ye of little faith," and then he calms the storm right then and there with his voice. And so this kind of parallels to that same chapter of Matthew, but this time the disciples see it and go, "Wow, oh my gosh, you really are the Son of God." And so that was something that I found really interesting too, is there'll be times in our lives, I know I've experienced this in my own personal life, of where you may be struggling with something, and then all of a sudden God pulls you out of it, and you can go, "Man, that was Jesus. That was nothing other than God working in my life." And so those are big and important moments to talk about with friends, and to not boast about your own glory, but God's glory. And so that was something that the disciples did here was, holy crap, this is Jesus. This is the Messiah that God promised in the Old Testament. And so that was something that was really cool that I found pretty interesting.
And I think
my reading.
Yeah, I think the good news is they did recognize it, and something we need to do is we need to recognize who God is, but something we need to do a little bit better is recognize it sooner.
Yeah.
Because if you guys read through Matthew, this is all taking place after Jesus fed 5,000 people with this much food. It takes place after John the Baptist has been killed, which there was a lot of debate that John the Baptist was the Messiah, even though John the Baptist was like, "No, it's not me."
He's yet to come.
Right, he's yet to come, and they're saying, "Well, but it might actually be you because you're baptizing and then he dies, and the whole point of Jesus is he's going to die and come back, and then John the Baptist never came back. So this is like after John the Baptist has died, and people should probably start saying, oh, well, maybe this is it. This is also taking place after the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes.
Yep.
If you guys know what those are, that's kind of important. It's in Matthew chapter 5. There's so many. He fasted the 40 days and 40 nights. He's fasted. Yep. He's fought with the devil when he tempted him 3 times. He's been through a whole bunch, and the disciples are just now vocalizing, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So something that we need to do is vocalize, this is the Son of God, this is the person that we believe in, but we need to do it a little bit faster.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It shouldn't take 17 different, it shouldn't take 14 chapters for them to realize it, and it shouldn't take us 78 different chances that God gives us for us to be like, okay, well, maybe you are. We need to do that immediately.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. So,
you got anything else?
No, I think that pretty much wraps up everything that I have studied and learned out of this chapter, and everything that we've dumped onto you as students. So,
we love you guys. We miss you guys. We can't wait to get back. We're hoping that we can figure something out for when the school year starts. We'll keep you updated on that. But until then, we'll see you guys next Sunday.
See you guys.